Hello, everybody, and good morning. I hope you're all doing well. I'm just gonna do this live, kind of by the seat of my pants here. I'm not, I'm just gonna wing it. I haven't really prepared too well for this one. Just have a lot on my mind and a lot of information rattling up in the brain, and I'm just gonna kind of try to mainly go off from what I can remember about things, but I also have other stuff I'm going to show you pertaining to the topic, and that's the whole deception that's seems to be forming just all across the board. Um, I also have some new footage for you that I took last night over top of my house, and there were a few different things, but I wanted to keep it short because it's not something I want to just focus on is what happened to me last night, but it's just strange because I've been getting emails and there's a few comments where other people are talking about things that they've seen, footage they've taken, and I don't click on links even if they're in like you know a live chat or a comment section or in an email because you can become compromised real quick. Your computer can get you know uh phishing scams and Trojan horses and spyware and malware and viruses, and it's real nasty what they got cooking out on the internet. So, I don't ever cook on links that people send me. So I expect that and I pray that people would just give me an explanation as to what they're talking about. And once I get to know people, I'd probably click on something, but I rarely click on anything that's sent to me because of that reason. And it's a no offense to anybody, but I just kind of do my own research as well. And um, it's just crazy, and I'll probably just start with showing you the video that I took last night, and I'm not going to make too big of a deal out of it. There's always going to be a few different sides of the table here. You're going to have people that say, "Oh, these are satellites," or you're going to say, "Oh," you're going to have people that say, "Oh, these are drones," or you're going to have people that are going to say that they're birds, or a space, the space station, or whatever. There's always going to be someone that says something contrary to the person that was there, that saw it with their own eyes. You can never really look at a picture or a video and relay what you're seeing in person. It always looks so much different in person than what the camera can pick up, whether it's even a photograph or whether it's a video. But I'm not an idiot. I'm a person that I'm an investigator. I look at things logically. I want to make sure that there's evidence. I don't just come out and say things. So when I'm telling you that these are strange anomalies that are happening to me, I would hope that people would trust me, you know, and even last night in the stuff that was happening in my sky, there was a plane that actually came from a different direction. Eventually, later on, as the events that took place last night stopped, and I took footage of that just to in the future show people the difference between a plane that I'm seeing and the way that that's flying versus what I've seen now. But so last night, I had photographs the night before last night, but last night I was able to take video and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. And I just got a couple of clips, but these aren't, we'll just call them UAPs, but these aren't UAPs from the other night when the last live that I did, where I showed you these pictures. Okay, like these are new, these are from last night. I went out about the same time, and again, there's that bright light in the sky off in the west. And what was interesting is that my wife, it was her birthday yesterday, and we had to get together with my son. We had my son over, and I made a cake, and they had my wife wanted pot roast, and so I'm not big on pot roast myself, but her and my son were eating, and we were just all kind of watching TV. We were watching that, what was it, that new Malcolm in the Middle season, which was, it's pretty funny, but it's a little weird. I'm not gonna lie, a little out there. But anyways, just trying to spend family time together with my wife and my son. And she ended up taking him home later on that night. And after she left, while she was gone for a while, this I went outside, and John Paul, one of my friends, was on the phone with me. I mean, it's not like he was there in person, but I went out there and to look and see if this light off in the distance was there, and it was not. It was not there. 15 minutes later, I went back outside to check, and it was there. Absolutely there. And the last time all these weird things started to happen, that was the initial one that showed up first. And the same thing that happened the other night began to happen last night. And it was interesting because my wife came home and saw, I pointed out this bright light. I said, that one is the one that kind of shows up first. And it was still there. It hadn't budged. It hadn't moved. It wasn't moving the way that, everything else was moving, later on in the night. Then my wife had to run to the store and grab something real quick. And when she left, that light was there. When she came back, I pointed out when she pulled in, I said, "Where's that light at, sweetie?" And she's like, "Where?" And I'm like, "That one that I showed you before you left." And she's like, "Oh, it's gone." And now my wife took out the dog last night. And my wife, I'm going to be honest with you, my wife is not a conspiracy theorist. She's a Christian. She loves Jesus, but she doesn't get into the things that we talk about a lot here on this channel, and I respect that about her. I do. I respect that she has a college education, and she looks at things a little differently, and she's very well learned in school, and is book smart, and so I respect her opinion, and she respects mine. And but after seeing the things that she did see, not just last night, but the night before, now when she goes outside, she's looking up and seeing, like, well, what's going on? And I'll tell you, not only that, but the birds are even acting strange. The birds were even out late. Um, really weird stuff happening. And so, me and her were talking about it, and then I got this clip together. I'm just going to show you. And it's only a 37-second clip. There's two bits in here. So initially there is a UAP that is moving across the sky. Some people will say it's this, some people will say it's that. I'm telling you, it is. I have seen satellites in the sky before. I have seen Starlink in person. All right. I have seen planes go by. I know what that stuff looks like. I pay attention, right? And I've never seen in my entire life, like what I've seen in the past couple of nights before in my life. Okay, like I'm telling you, like this stuff is odd. All right, and the camera isn't translating it as well as I would like. But I'm not just out here willy nilly like, hey, God, you seen that? I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it. I think it is what it is. But I was even trying to get my neighbors to come outside last night, and my one neighbor, she gets kind of scared, so she's like, I'm not gonna lie to you. She's like, oh hell nah. You know what I mean? Like, no, thank you. She says, I'm eating pancakes. I'm like, okay, all right, I understand. But she sent out her brother that lives with her, and he saw what was going on. And I'm trying to get my other neighbors to to start having an eye out, because when you have multiple eyes out on the situation, things, you can catch stuff that you normally wouldn't catch. But so there's two clips here, okay, and I put them back to back. There's a blank space in between them, so you'll know when it happens. All right, and then in the secondary clip, I copied the anomaly, and I put it at the end of the clip. And then after that, I copied it again, and then I slowed it down 2 times. So I'm going to go ahead and play that clip for you now. And hold on a moment. I'm going to blow this up a little bigger here. All right. So there is a light, and this is before the stars started shining. I'm telling you. I mean, I have footage, all right, that I took that's not in this, that you can pan all around in the sky, and there's nothing there. East, west, north, south, it's there's nothing there. But over top of my house, there's these anomalies appearing. All right. And this one right here started moving away when it was still before, and it started moving away from the other light. All right. And then I'll show you this here. And that kind of arched. If you didn't notice, that kind of arched a little bit. All right. It didn't fly a specific straight path. Now here's another weird one. All right. Watch the left-hand side of the screen, right in the middle, over towards that darker side of the screen, right in the middle of the left-hand side of the screen right now. And you see that light appear and then it disappear. All right. And here it is repeated and zoomed in. All right. You can see it literally, it's not there. And then it appears and then it disappears. And now here it is slowed down, appearing and then disappearing. And just like with the footage in my driveway, where that light slowly faded in and got really, really bright, and then it slowly faded out, not to where it was off, but then it moved upwards like it was low. There was footage or pictures from yesterday, from the last live I did, sorry. There was pictures that I took from the last live that I did where I showed this evidence that I did not show the public, that I've only showed a few friends. The reason being is because it has indication markers of where I live. Okay. But I literally got these orbs, and I believe they're demonic. And I believe they're trying to intimidate me because of what I'm doing. I think that's a part of it. But I also believe there's a great deception coming. And that's where I want to get into this today. And I want to kind of try to break this down for people. All right. But so there was a picture that I got of where these lights were down lower above the street lamp, and there was also a light above my neighbor's house, and it changed color to blue. So, I mean, people can say it's satellites, people can say it's drones and this and that and this and that, but I'm there in person and I'm looking, and I can tell when it's a drone. I can tell when it's a plane. I can tell when it's a satellite. I can tell when it's the International Space Station. That is not what this is. All right. I've looked at the skies long enough, and there's been some times where I'm like, oh, that's a strange light, and I didn't think nothing of it. I'm not doing this because I have a YouTube channel and oh, I want to see like I'm an important person and I got lights over my house. Like I don't care. You know what I mean? Like I genuinely don't care what happens. But this one took me back. Like I'm like, I can't believe this is going on above my house. And so I'll play it from the beginning, but you can see the one light moving and it kind of arcs down just a little bit. It doesn't stay, it goes straight for a while and then it shifts and changes trajectory and starts heading downwards. And so that's one of them. And then right here on the left hand side of the screen, it appears and disappears. And then I zoom in and it appears, disappears. And then I zoom in again, slow down, and it appears, disappears. So I wanted to show you guys that before I got started today about, what is kind of going on in my neck of the woods. And so there's a difference between, these, we'll call them orbs for now. We'll get into that in a little bit. But we'll call them orbs for now, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. All right. And there's a difference between those and the flying saucers, the metallic craft that people see. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get my water container to open up. Sorry. And so there is a documentary out there, and it is not for the faint of heart, but it's called Conspiratus, the Illuminati Conspiracy. And in that, they break it down pretty well, showing you the differences between these UFOs and UAPs and the balls of light and these metallic craft and all this stuff that exist. And, I believe that there is demonic influence going on, but I believe that the powers that be, the rulers of the world, the government, the military industrial complex, if you want to call it the deep state, I think that's, a relatively irrelevant term now. Um, but it's there's a shadow government that is a part of this. And I'll be honest with you, I think this is more and I'm not talking about the balls of light and the weird anomalies like that, but I'm talking about the metallic craft and the gray aliens and all this mumbo jumbo. I see it more as a conspiracy of men, and there's a lot of manipulation going on, and I want to talk about that today. And so, back during Nazi Germany, and I can't remember the year, back during the time of Nazi Germany and in World War II and all that stuff, there was a guy named Kenneth Arnold, and I forget the year that he saw the UFOs that he saw near Mount Rainier in Washington State in America, but that was supposed to be, he's called the forefather of the UFO or the godfather of the UFO movement or whatever, Kenneth Arnold, and he saw these craft. Hey, Carol, good to see you. Good morning. Hey, Darth Echo, good to see you. And CPF 36, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Hope you guys are having a good morning. Thanks for jumping in the live chat today. Feathers, good to see you, sister. Anyway, so Kenneth Arnold was the first one that saw him, and it was during that time frame. Hold on, let me just Google this because it's easier. I just want to be clear. So it was June 24th, 1947, and there was a lot of things happening in 1947, even with Israel, the I think the 6 Day War was in 1948. So there, Israel was in the process of becoming a nation again. Now, hold on one second. I'm going to write that down so that way I don't forget it. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay, so here's the thing. Yeah, Kenneth Arnold saw the hold on. Let me do one more search because I want to be clear here on years here. So there's this movement that kind of began in the 1940s, and Nazi Germany was a huge part of it, and there was you got to understand the origins of UFOs, and it's directly related to the occult. It's directly related to the cult Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. Hey, Chris, good to see you, brother. So, the whole idea in Nazi Germany, and it was being ran by the Illuminati. I mean, there's no arguing with that. When you get into the symbolism and you get into, the people that were behind Adolf Hitler, it was the Illuminati 110%. And I will tell you to go back to my video section on my channel and look up Doc Marquis. And it's a documentary called Dictators of the Illuminati. And in that, you really find out, how the Illuminati was behind these guys. Um, Anyways, but there was two secret societies that were operating within the Third Reich in Nazi Germany, and one was called the Thule Society and one was called the Vril Society. Thule, Thule, and then Vril, Vril, Vril. All right, to the point where even one of the flying saucers that the Nazis ended up engineering was known as the Vril flying saucer. And so the first blueprints for these craft, these flying discs, was about in 1938, and this guy named Joseph Epp, EPP, Joseph Epp, uh, what created the first blueprint for a flying disc. Okay, it was in 1938 because they're using these secret societies, especially the Vril, and there was a, and I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie Minority Report, where in that movie they have these cogs, these women that are seers, and they're trying to catch people in pre-crime before the crime happens. If these seers see you committing a crime, they send out the police to, and it was, Tom Cruise that was in it, and they send out the police to, arrest you before the crime's even committed, and they say that this is stopping crime, up to this certain percentage and blah blah blah. All right, and an AI will be part of that cog, I promise, in the future, and there will be a pre-crime unit in the future, mark my words. But though, just like those cogs in Minority Report, you had seers in the Vril Society, these women that would. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. There was some incubus stuff going on, and I don't know if you know what the difference between incubus and succubus is, but there is, just like with the fallen angels mating with human women, and those human women bearing the species of the Nephilim, that where the genetics were being altered through the fallen angels. They're messing with the human DNA by having intercourse with these women, bearing the species back in the ancient of times. Just like that, you know, you have incubus and succubus. Incubus is a male demon or a male, fallen angel or whatever, taking shape and having intercourse with a woman. And then a succubus would be a female demon or, fallen angel taking shape and having intercourse with a man. Now, here's the thing. It can go both ways. It's, when it comes to the demonic realm, you can have a succubus going after a woman, a sexual demonic spirit going after a woman, enticing her to sleep with women. And then you can have an incubus going after a man, enticing him to seek out strange flesh, themselves. So there's no holds barred when it comes to the demonic realm, and when the demons have legal right to, attack somebody. Okay, sometimes they can come just to your door, but they can't come in, and they want to intimidate. But God only, when it's a Christian, God ain't going to allow you to be attacked like that. There's some people that deal with attacks from prior engagements and things like that, and God, sets them free from those things. And it's always through the blood of Jesus, always through the name of Jesus, always through the power of Jesus Christ that those things happen. There's been plenty of times where, people have cried out to Jesus in abduction experiences, and those abduction experiences stop, boom, right on the money, right on the dot, and go away. And the demons run shrieking. They run away shrieking and screaming because they heard the name Jesus. And this is something that has happened many times, hundreds of times, if not thousands, in my opinion. But so you have these women that are channeling these spirits and having relations with these spirits. And these women are the high priestesses of the occult in the Third Reich in Nazi Germany. And they're getting an acceleration of information from their contact with these entities. And that's what it's always been about from the beginning of the conception of this thing, of the occult, the contact with these entities in an acceleration of information. That's what they were doing at the Tower of Babel. They were sacrificing human children to pay that blood toll, um, to pay for the collect call to get online with one of these entities, these fallen angels, and they would come and they would possess one of these statues that were at the top of the Tower of Babel. All right. And these entities would give in return for the blood of the innocent a acceleration of information. And so really the beginning of the UFO movement in general was in 1938. All right. That's when they sought out these entities to be able to get an acceleration of information. And this is how Joseph Epp completed his first blueprint for a flying disc in 1938. All right. And then in 1941, you had concept models that were submitted to the Third Reich for review. All right. And so from the time of 1944 into 1946, you had sightings begin to start to take place. All of this, and I'm telling you, and I don't care what people say here, I've done my research. All of this UFO nonsense does not go back to the ancient times. There were people in Nazi Germany known as the Monument Men, and they sought out high class and older artworks and pieces, and they had really skilled artists go back and start altering older artworks to project that the idea of the UFOs goes back into ancient history, because that was part of the deception that the Nazis were beginning to work on. All right. Whether you want to believe so or not, these are the facts. All right. And so, again, in 1944, 1945, 1946, there were all these prototypes being seen. And I've shown you pictures in past lives where, these UFOs have landing gear, and they when they take off, they have a contrail behind them, the same as like a jet would. Okay. Like that day's jet, there would be like this, exhaust that would be coming from, and they couldn't vertically lift off. They had to have a runway, all these different prototypes for these saucers, because from the very beginning of the conception of this thing in the late 1930s, the demons and the fallen angels and Satan have had a plan to bring about what's coming about right now. So in 1946, in 1944 and 1945, you had military sightings of these craft, and during World War II, they called them Foo Fighters. All right? They called them Foo Fighters. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the metallic craft. It was what we would call, an orb or a ball of light, or, these entities. I believe these are living entities that are these balls of light. All right. There's a difference between the metallic craft that was created by man and these demonic entities that are helping the deception take place, because they don't think man can see the difference between the two. Whether it's this ball of light that can travel at extreme speeds, it can take abrupt turns, it can stop on a dime, it can appear, it can disappear, and do all these weird things. The metallic craft cannot do these things. The things that man has created to help out the demonic entities pull off a great deception to unite the world and to explain away the disappearance of Christians off the planet when the pre-tribulation rapture comes. That's why they're working together to do this stuff. And I know it seems wild, but we're going to get into it more and more as we go on with this live. But it was in 1946 that Kenneth Arnold, all right, saw these craft, a string of these craft flying around near Mount Rainier in Washington State. All right. And just before that, you had Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard is the one that started Scientology. And Jack Parsons had the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, that worked with NASA. And Jack Parsons even talked about how he would seek out these entities through satanic ritual and orgy rituals and sex magic, okay, for an acceleration of information. He accredits the idea of jet rocketry or just rocketry in general, to these entities giving him this information to have this breakthrough for NASA to get this quote unquote supposed space race going. Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were mentors to Aleister Crowley, the most influential Satanist of the 20th century. And hold on, let me bring this up here. I got to search something up. I got to find this here. Hold on. So I'm going to just save it here and pop it up here. Hold on. Goodness. It's being stupid. The screen's freezing. Well, I'm just going to show you here. I'm going to share screen because my computer's being weird, obviously. Just like last time, I'm trying to talk about the stuff and the stuff gets weird. So Aleister Crowley, if you look over here to the right, Aleister Crowley channeled these demonic spirits, and this one was called Lamb, this entity that he drew. Aleister Crowley drew this, and it's called Lamb, and it looks hand in hand with what we would consider a gray alien. All right. Now, again, Aleister Crowley's quote at the bottom here, he says, "Today they call them angels and demons. Tomorrow they will call them something else." All right. Now, with that being said, I'm going to try to do this here. Hold on a moment. I don't know if I still have the video, but we're going to try. Hold on a second. Yeah, I still have the videos. Now, listen to what this Catholic exorcist is claiming. Very interesting stuff.
I do know other exorcists where they would, in session, they would actually, once the demon manifested, they would manifest in literally looking like an alien with the eyes and the small mouth and the whole bit turning gray. And they even call themselves gray. And they try and lie to the exorcist by saying, "Oh, well, we're not angels, good angels, and we're not bad angels. We're not demons. We're kind of in the middle. We're neither good nor bad." No, dude, you're just a demon, right? Because when you start talking to them, it's all that is a diversionary tactic, which they do in the session. So just as we're seeing this play out itself on a grander scale in the world with the whole alien thing, they'll try and do that in session where they're just trying to distract you by something that they know that is not true, but they're hoping you'll believe it's true, because then from there they can manipulate you.
So that's the goal, is they want to manipulate mankind. And so, again, we've seen the Obama clips where he says, we just have to flood the square with enough raw sewage, with enough conspiracy theorizing that people will no longer know what to believe. All right. And so I want to cut through the cheese on this today, but I want to show you some more. Like, because remember, Obama came out and said this the other day.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
So, yeah, unless there's an enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the president of the United States. He said they're real, though, right? He said they're real. You heard him say that they're real. And then now Donald Trump came out after that and said this.
Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real.
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that.
Well,
So he gave out classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that, is what Donald Trump says. And so there's all this kinds of information coming out, and we could go back to, and I'm getting there in a moment. Actually, I'm going to keep talking for a moment here. But so you have Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, all right, get together, and I'm gonna be very graphic here. This is very sexually graphic, okay? So if you don't want to listen to it, just hop off, because I'm into showing the inner core of this thing. I'm not gonna pussyfoot around with nothing. We're just going for the throat on this thing. But so L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, all right, back in 1947, they go into the Mojave Desert, okay, and this was in 1946. I'm sorry, 1946. They go into the Mojave Desert and they do a sex magic ritual, and it was ritualistic masturbation and all this stuff. Okay, I won't go too deep into it, but that's what was going on. All right, and so they believed that through this sex magic that they were performing, all right, and they believed that through this ritual known as the Babylon working that Aleister Crowley created himself, that they were able to open up a portal, okay, and allow demonic entities to come in through, and people that were there that supposedly witnessed this take place, all right, said that they saw entities pouring in from another, we'll call it another plane of existence, or another dimension, and coming into ours. All right. So the way that God created the earth, he created hell for the devils and his angels. But it seems that mankind, through these rituals, can, open doors to allow these entities to come and mess with mankind. And so during this moment, and during Kenneth Arnold's first seeing UFOs near Mount Rainier, it was during the 1946, 1947 that the public finally started to see that there was this alien thing going on, right? And so Nazi Germany was creating these metallic UFOs, and the demonic entities and the fallen angels were helping that deception by doing all the crazy work in the skies for people to see. And then they started to create the Horton Ho, the Hanabu 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. And the Vril flying saucer, the Glock, which is known as the Bell, which is the first one that could vertically lift off. The Hanabus could vertically lift off. I don't believe that the Vril could vertically lift off. I believe it needed a runway. But regardless, it was a conspiracy of men working with the kingdom of the enemy to start bringing about, and it was through occult ritual and Satanism that this whole thing even began. And then they transfer Nazi scientists into America under Operation Paperclip, and we'll get into that in a moment, but one of those scientists was Werner von Braun.
And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie.
All of it is a lie. Even Nazi scientists were telling you it's a lie. It's a joke. And so because the occult initiated, got it started, and the new age is the new age of Satanism, and it's a new front that has opened up as we've moved forward with this thing. All the little alien contact and all that stuff, and the channelers and the seers and all these people are now all of a sudden it's kind of been transferred from Satanism into the New Age. And Anton LaVey, who founded LaVeyan Satanism and the Church of Satan in San Francisco, California, said that the New Age is the devil's game without taking his infernal name. That's a quote. He said the New Age is the devil's game without taking his infernal name. So New Age is Luciferianism and Satanism repackaged for the masses to bring about a great deception, to be able to trick mankind into believing that aliens are real and that they come from outer space. There has not been, I mean, I could go into it, but we could just say right off the bat, there would be, traffic being noticed on radar, things like that, of these things coming and going from the planet, if that was what was taking place. And J. Allen Hynek during the 50s, and Jacques Vallée, who was the Frenchman, who they portrayed as the Frenchman in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, all right, worked in Project Blue Book for the U.S. government, going and investigating all these instances across the globe. All right. And they were really muzzled heavily to what they could say about what it was. But the reality is, after they kind of got out of Project Blue Book and wrote some of their own literature, and I have 3 of Jacques Vallée's books, they go on to say that these things are demonic, they're malevolent, they are lying to us, they are deceiving mankind as to what they actually are. He says they're interdimensional and not from outside of this world. He said they're from here, but they appear and disappear, like they're going between the veils of the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And this is that same veil that, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard ripped open to allow these things to come in. All right. So you have this huge movement. Then you have the Nazis that went back and changed artwork with the Monument Men. All right. And that was the sole purpose of the Monument Men. It wasn't to preserve artwork. It was to change artwork, because there was this huge deception coming. And then once you had Nazi scientists be funneled into America under Operation Paperclip, all right, and then you had Jack Parsons and the Jet Propulsion Laboratories, JPL, start working with NASA, and then German scientists working with NASA. All of a sudden, NASA became this forefront for all of this stuff. And then then they transferred all of this stuff, I think it was to Avron. And I can't remember, it was like the Aeronautical Vehicular Research Organization National or something like that, okay? It was something like that. I'm botching it probably. And then DARPA was involved in that. And then the military industrial complex got involved. And then they just took this thing underground into the deep underground military bases. And this is where they're continuing to make this technology and all this stuff. Now, I'm going to switch tracks a little bit here. Okay. And you have, 2 different types of entities that work for the kingdom of Satan. You have fallen angels and you have demons. I'm going there real quick. Hold on. I got to get a drink. So it says in Genesis 6, it talks about the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, which are the angels of God. They came down and they mated with human women. They took themselves wives of however many they wanted, and I believe they shape-shifted into something that could procreate, and got these women pregnant and altered the DNA of mankind. They mingled themselves with the seed of mankind, and they created what we now call the Nephilim. But there are 6 different tribes. It's either 5 or 6 different tribes of those Nephilim. There's the Raphaim, there's the Nephilim, and then there's a few other ones. The Bible outlines these different tribes, and you can look into this yourself if you want. When people say, "Oh, it's the Nephilim," it's a little ignorant. It's a little ignorant because it wasn't just the Nephilim. The Nephilim was one of these tribes of these giants that were being produced by the interaction and the genetic modification of human beings by fallen angels. Now, in the Bible, it talks about these giants, being born, and when the Israelites came out of the Exodus and they went into the land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land, Israel, to take it back from the Canaanites, the Israelites come back, the spies come back and said that we're like grasshoppers in the sight of these things. They were huge. They found skeletons of these giants all the way up to 36 feet tall. And some of the earlier kingdoms of these giants that they had, like Shangri-La and Atlantis and stuff like that, they have the structures that were built, what they call the Cyclopean megaliths, or just megaliths in general, were absolutely massive. The walls were super thick and they were super high. And it took a tremendous amount of these Nephilim. And I'll be honest with you, I think when God destroyed the world with the flood, and the Noahic flood, and saved Noah and his family, I think not only were they pretty much the only Christians left, or believers in God and Yahweh left, and I believe they were the only pure genetics that God was sparing, because I think that the whole entire world was messing around with genetic manipulation. We could call it CRISPR technology today, But anyways, we're going somewhere with this. So when these giants died, and when the flesh died, because they were half human, half angel, fallen angel, their spirits, they had spirits. And so this is where the idea of a spirit seeking out possession, attachment, vexation, oppression, possession of an individual. It talks about in the Bible, these spirits, when they leave, they walk around seeking rest, finding none, and ultimately seek to come back and possess the host from which they came. All right, because at one point these spirits had a body, and it was the spirits of the giants that are going around it. In the Bible, it talks about them being an unclean spirit, a strong man spirit. You ever noticed how when these demons possess people, people become super strong? It's because the spirit is strong, not the flesh. The thing that's entered into the people, like that man who had legions of demons. Jesus asked the man that was possessed, that was breaking the chains that he was being bound with. And Jesus said, "What is your name?" They said, "We are legion, for we are many." And I think a legion is like 1,000. Don't quote me on that. I could be botching that. But so you have you have people that can be possessed not by just one spirit, but they can be possessed by multiple spirits. And then I just showed you a video a little bit ago, when these things appear now and they come out of people, they look like these gray aliens. And when Aleister Crowley channels these spirits, they look like gray aliens. I believe at one point they might have looked like this beautiful being of light, and they can appear as an angel of light, like in the sky, like an orb. Okay. But in reality, because of their sin and because of the world and the darkness here, it is shape shifted these things. These things are ugly looking. And I think a gray absolutely is nasty and grotesque. But I don't believe that it started off that way, them looking like gray aliens when they appeared. I think that's the way they're appearing to mankind now, because that's part of the agenda and the deception that's coming. So I'm going to talk about something here because it's really important, but it sounds really far out there, but I promise you, this is what I know to be fact. All right. And I've done a lot of research on this stuff. I've been in research like this for over 25 years. Okay. So I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here. I'm not looking really at anything. I got a couple of notes on a small pad of paper, and that's about it to help keep myself on track with what I'm doing. All right. And so my buddy Doc Marquis, he was born into the order of the Illuminati, into the Marquis family, but he believed that he was one of the bastard children of one of the Rothschilds. I have most of his documentaries and videos that he's done on my video section on my channel. And you just listen to the guy, and it's all the proof that you need. I mean, Doc died in 2017 or 2018, I believe. And even after his death, the dude's never been wrong when it comes to the plans of the Illuminati and what they're trying to pull off. Okay. And I found him earlier in my early 20s. I was like 20 years old, 21 years old when I met him. And he mentored me for well over 10 years. All right. And I got to know him personally, and we would talk on the phone at, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time and have these really deep conversations. And, I would order his DVDs because he'd say, like, hey, like, it's easier for you to watch the DVD and learn this and then come back and we'll talk about it, right? Because he's trying to teach me from the ground up. But it takes 4 hours, 5 hours for some of these DVD sets that he released, and I put them on my channel for free for people to see now that he's dead. Because I remember when me and him were talking one day, I had found some of his DVDs on YouTube that people were putting out there, and I asked him, I said, aren't you upset that people are like, plagiarizing and doing this with your material? And he said no. He says it's more about the information getting out there. And so I don't believe that Doc would be upset with me putting his information out there. It's about people knowing this stuff. It's about people learning this stuff. And so anyways, at the age of 3, he was dedicated to the cause of Lucifer because he was born into the Illuminati. Just like, Christians will take their children and go dedicate them to God and get them baptized after they're born and give them over to God. All right. Satanists do the same thing, but with Lucifer. And then, so at the age of 3, he was dedicated to the cause of Lucifer. And at the age of 13, he was old enough to make his own decision to be a part of this thing. And there was a ritual that they did where they took this knife called athame, and it's like a wavy knife. All right. It looks like it swerves right and left, and then it comes to a point. And they cut his arm open, and they made him sign in his own blood into the Book of the Dead, the Illuminati Book of the Dead, his new occult name that they gave him. All right. And he said, man, they really laid his arm wide open when they did that. And he even showed me the scar. It was true. It was real. All right. And he said, so at the age of 13, and then he got involved in basically the Illuminati's version of what we would call a seminary. All right. And so after the seminary, after he grew up in the order of the Illuminati, was taught all the ways and all the plans of the Illuminati. And remember, Doc was someone who was born into it, so he was privy to things that other people are not privy to. There's people that can act, like even Bill Schnoebelen. I love Bill Schnoebelen, but he's Timu Doc Marquis. If you've seen Bill Schnoebelen talk, this Mason or this ex-Satanist Mason that's revealing all these secrets, dude, wait until you hear what Doc Marquis has to say and how Doc lays it out, and you can tell the difference. I always call Bill Timu Doc Marquis. All right, I really do. So Doc Marquis, after he graduated seminary, he was forced by the Illuminati to join the military. And that class that had graduated, they all went out to the different branches of the U.S. military, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the National Guard, the Coast Guard, all of that stuff, okay? And so they joined on, and their goal in the order of the Illuminati was to establish fully operative covens on each of these military bases across the United States and to compromise high level of military officials through sex and bribery, okay, into these covens, so that way whatever these high level military officials had access to, the Illuminati now had access to. And Doc's words to me were, we really were too good at what we were doing. We really were too good at what we were doing. So they did this, they got involved, all right? And I mean, he even told me stories about, like, that you wouldn't believe. that happened during this time of the Illuminati infiltrating the military bases. Okay. And so what happened is during his time uh, at this military base, he ended up getting witnessed to by a Christian. And he said for the next 3 years of his life, he said that he was being witnessed to by Christians. He said they were jumping out of trees, jumping out of moving vehicles. He made it kind of comical because for 3 years of his life, he was being nonstop witnessed to. And this is what's important for Christians to understand. Militant evangelism and persistent evangelism, I believe, is super important because sometimes you have a breakthrough when you don't give up. Satan wants to back you off. He wants to puff it up. He wants to puff his chest out and seem tough. But when you don't step back, when that happens, then all of a sudden he cowers down. And God has a breakthrough in someone's life because you're persistent and you don't give up and you don't surrender to the fear of the enemy. So here's the thing. So Doc Marquis went to church eventually after this 3 years. And he says, I walked into that church, a sold out slave of Satan. And he says, I walked out that day a born again child of the King. And I'll tell you, man, Doc would absolutely be shocked. I don't think he would actually be, but I think he would be shocked to see the things that are happening now across the globe, across the world. And he would have a lot to say. I'm telling you, a lot to say. He had a lot of people's respect. There were a lot of people that knew Doc Marquis. I've even had conversations with L.A. Marzulli about my friendship with Doc Marquis. Actually, and I've never said this publicly, and it kind of got pushed aside, but L.A. Marzulli was even going to come on my show because I was friends with Doc Marquis. And I was a small channel, but those LA fires took place and he got busy. I got busy with documentaries and stuff, so it just didn't happen. And I just haven't talked to L.A. Marzulli in a while through email. But me and L.A. Marzulli were talking about Doc. You know, L.A. Marzulli was friends with Doc Marquis. All right. So he was and even Ted Gunderson, who exposed the McMartin case where, you know, these children were being taken to do satanic rituals up in the mountains from this daycare center, the McMartin Daycare Center in California there, that actually started this whole thing called the Satanic Panic. And Ted Gunderson was friends with Doc Marquis. Doc Marquis was helping Ted Gunderson solve satanic ritual abuse crimes. Ted would come to Doc for information. Doc Marquis been on Hard Copy. He's been on Geraldo Rivera's show. He was on Oprah Winfrey's show, talk about this stuff. I even have clips of Doc Marquis, you know, on the Oprah Winfrey show. And you know, he was also on Unsolved Mysteries. Like, Doc was a very influential person, and he knew what he was talking about. All right. And Doc's the one that taught me this stuff from the ground up. And so Doc Marquis, when he was in the military, he transferred to Germany, to an American military base in Germany. And hold on, give me a moment, because I want to just tell you, I have to see it. What are the names of the U.S. bases in Germany? I have to see it because I never remember it. I'm trying to think here because I can't remember the name of it. Anyways, I don't want to take too much time, but I want to give you accurate information. So it was not the Ramstein Air Base. Hold on. Give me a moment here. Rhineland. It was Rhineland. It was Rhineland. All right. Rheinland. It was Rhineland Air Force Base. I knew it started with an R, but I knew it wasn't the Ramstein. And it is the third largest base in U.S. base in Germany. And he told me, this is what he told me. This was a private conversation that me and Doc Marquis had when we were on the phone with each other. All right. And this is what he told me. He says at Rhineland Air Force Base in Germany, all right, it's an Air Force base, even though Doc was in the U.S. military, because he had Illuminati clearance, because he was a member of the Illuminati, he had access to this. So, anyways, so he visited this base, okay? And he said, beneath this base, he said there was a deep underground military bunker. And he says that there was a highway beneath this base. And he says he couldn't, and this is his words, he says, I cannot tell you how long this highway was that was beneath the ground. He said on the floor of the highway, there was these color-coded lines. He said you had an index that told you this color takes you here, this color takes you there. And then he said you had like a cart that you rode on beneath the ground and you stayed on this color. And when the color stopped, you have arrived at your destination. Makes sense, right? So he said, and I'm just telling you what he told me, all right? I believe he is 100% correct, because there's a movie that coincides with what he told me that came out years later in 2015, after Doc had already told me this stuff, that confirmed to me what Doc Marquis was saying to me. They tell you truths in movies. They really do. There's a portion of truth in some of these movies. They lie to you all the time. But there are hidden truths that they put out there because they have to tell you what they're doing. So he said that they followed this certain color and they got to this certain place, and there was these laboratories in this underground military base, this highway, right off of the highway. And he said that it was in this laboratory that he walked into because of his Illuminati clearance, that he saw with his own eyes. And he said that, and remember, you got to remember something before I tell you this, that Satan cannot create anything himself. He cannot make something out of nothing. Only God can do that. Only God can create like that. All right. And everything that we create here on this earth has to come from materials that come from the earth that God created. So everything that we create has to come from materials that God gave us, that a lot of them reproduce. All right. I believe oil reproduces. I don't believe oil is from the dinosaurs. I believe that the oil comes from the lubricant that's inside the earth that helps. I won't get into it. I'm not going to get into that because it's a huge thing. But so anyways, oil is replenishable. They even talk about how there's certain gemstones like opal that's replenishable. All right. They can grow crystals and gems in laboratories. It's all replenishable. All right. And trees, they start off as a seed, they grow big, they produce more seed. It's all replenishable. The water, the way it evaporates up into the sky catches it, goes to the mountaintops, drops it down, the rain comes down, the rivers flow to the ocean, and then it happens all over again. It's like a cleaning cycle. God has this all dialed in. But Satan can't do anything without creation that's already in existence. So just like that, Doc Marquis said that they were taking human genetics to create the gray aliens. And what Doc Marquis said was, he said that they actually didn't have the idea of a gray alien at first. And he said, so when you had alien movies back in the 40s and 50s and all that stuff or whatever, he said that they were projecting them as tall or short or fat or skinny, or they had hair and they didn't have hair, or they had colored hair, or just all this different weird bizarre images of aliens. And you can go back and look at all those older movies. They did not hone in on the gray alien until they started manipulating the human genetics to be able to create the gray aliens. Now here's the thing. The gray aliens are like a living entity that they've created with human genetics. He said he even saw the beginning stages of the gray aliens being created, and he said the first experiments were like blobs of living human flesh, and he said they just kind of moved up and down. He said it was grotesque, and he says they're supposed to be killing off these experiments when they do them after a certain time. He says they keep them alive. I don't know, and I don't recommend the movie, but just kind of like the movie Splice, just like the movie Splice, they're manipulating genetics and creating these entities. Now, I could get into Mary Kay Baxter and her story. And the reason I believe Mary Kay Baxter's story of being shown heaven and shown hell to warn mankind that they're real, all right, is because of the information that Jesus gave her when he took her to hell, and she saw this area where these women that were used to incubate these monstrosities and give birth to these monstrosities were in hell. All right. And they were in I won't get into what they went through in hell, but in that book, A Divine Revelation of Satan's Deceptions, is where you would find that information. And I believed her story because she was a country wife. She was a homemaker. She was a farm wife. She didn't have this deep knowledge of these secret laboratories all over the globe that Jesus told her about, that where these things were happening, where these monstrosities were being created. And so they'll have their judgment coming. Trust me, they all have their judgment coming if they don't repent. But here's the thing, all right? So they create these entities, all right? And MJ12, the Majestic 12, that Bill Cooper, Wild Bill Cooper, William Cooper, whatever you want to call him, he wrote Behold a Pale Horse. He talked about the agreements that were struck between the Majestic 12 and these fallen angels. And part of the agreements was like, hey, you can take a certain amount of humans, you can take a certain amount of cattle, blah, blah, blah. And then it got out of control and they couldn't stop it. And there's a lot to that. But so Majestic 12 agreed to make them these flesh suits for the demons, for the spirits of the Nephilim, the giants, to possess, to pull off these deceptions. Now, the fallen angels, they can shapeshift. I don't believe the spirits of the giants can shapeshift. And so they need a body. Now, if you're seeing something shapeshift and look like a demon, it's obviously like some kind of fallen angel. You know what I mean? But anyways, I'm sidetracking here. But so MJ12, agreed to make this stuff and also provide resources for these beings. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I would not recommend watching this in front of children or anything like that. And I wouldn't recommend soft. There are Christians out here who have very soft and tender spirits. They think they can handle something, but they really can't handle it. Right? They get fearful and they got to go read their Bible, because they're so fearful. And I understand that. I respect that. I do. But so I'm telling people, if they have a soft and tender spirit, don't go watch this movie. But there's a movie called Area 51 that came out. I think it was in 2015. All right. And it's a movie about these people, this dude that has this abduction experience, and he gets a team of people together. And it's actually a really well done movie. It's what you would call a found footage film. All right. And in this, they infiltrate Area 51. And here's some spoiler alerts here. So if you're going to watch the movie, turn this off right now. But so in that, they go through these layers of this deep underground military base that is Area 51. And as they get to the bottom layers of this thing, they take this elevator down. It's a very old and rickety elevator. And inside the elevator are these gray flesh suits. Okay. And there you go. They're all, they look all oiled up and ready for these entities to put them on. And as soon as you get down this elevator, you're in these dirt tunnels where humans have been kidnapped, taken, and we'll just say eaten. Okay. There and especially there's all sorts of children's toys down there and things like that. Remember what we know about these people and the children. Okay. What we talk about on this channel. But so they never really show you the entities themselves because I believe they're demonic in this movie, Area 51. But they're extremely strong because they're spirits from the giants. So that movie, Area 51, really confirms what I'm saying. And I've not had end times talk since then, but I've been saying these things for years. And when I saw Area 51 that was made in 2015, it blew me away. I'm like, that's exactly what I've been told by Doc Marquis. And that's exactly what Bill Cooper talked about, MJ12. All right. And all this stuff. All right. And so the reality of this thing is that aliens, the UFOs, the alien deception, the UAPs, all this stuff, the gray aliens, all this stuff is a conspiracy of men, of humans, not from outside outer space, working with demonic entities that have been here since the beginning, working in unison together to be able to pull off this great deception. All right. And so, with that being said, this has been going on so long that Ronald Reagan said this when he was speaking at the United Nations.
Unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Right there, people. Right there. You heard it out of the man's mouth himself. And he was a member of the Bohemian Grove, and he was a member of the Order of the Illuminati. I could tell you things about him and his wife. I mean, even down to how, Nancy Reagan was, they called her Never Say No Nancy. She is a nasty woman, and you can figure out what it means. Never say no, Nancy, right? She was programmed. But so I'm gonna show you something here because I'm going somewhere, and I don't know if YouTube is gonna freak out because I'm showing you this, but I'm really taking a chance here showing you this. All right, and so I'm gonna put this out there, and it is a new movie that's coming out, and I'm going to get into who's making the movie and all that stuff. I'm sure some of you have already seen this, all right? But for those who haven't, I'm going to show it to you now.
If you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would that frighten you?
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Let's today is today's
People have a right to know the truth. It belongs to 7 billion people.
What is it?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. So I'm going to show you.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world. All at once.
People keep wondering. Encountering the unknown.
They're coming! They're coming!
They are starved for the truth.
Do you think there could be others?
Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us.
And so their disclosure day is coming. You have to understand that. Their disclosure day is coming. But the truth that they want to give you isn't the actual truth. It's this deception that they have prepared for almost the last 100 years. I mean, I'm talking like 70, 80 years they've been working on this deception. And Doc Marquis said that all of this was for one reason and one reason alone. And this is what he told me. He said that they are going to do this to try to explain away the disappearance of millions of Christians off the planet that happens simultaneously. And so here's the thing. He said that they're going to project that they took us in their mothership to re-educate us because we're holding the world's back from this new age or this age of Aquarius or this new world order, and that these aliens are going to usher us into this new world order, and it's demonic. It's demonic. And like you could watch that what was that show called? It's called Childhood's End. There's places where you can find it. Very hard to find though, but it's called Childhood's End. I actually have it on DVD, and it's all about these aliens that are actually demons, deceiving mankind into a dystopian future that is a lot likened to George Orwell's 1984. So here's the thing. There's this deception coming that they're brewing, that they're getting ready to deceive the masses. And also they want to use it to unite mankind, to lay down their weapons, and this false peace that's coming. That when they say peace and safety, that's going to be, I think, from this great deception that's coming. The Antichrist, they're going to use the Antichrist. They're going to promote the Antichrist, and the Antichrist is going to promote them. The religious systems that stand behind the Antichrist, like Islam and Catholicism and even Judaism, because they reject Jesus Christ, are going to be deceived into helping promote this new world, new age order that is coming. And I believe because of even the things that are happening at my doorstep, I believe because the things that are happening at your doorstep, I think if you just pay attention and look up, you'd see how great this deception is abounding. The demons and the fallen angels and the powers that be are in overtime, working overtime to try to deceive mankind to help bring about this new world order. And so I really pray that people are paying attention during this time. I absolutely believe Jesus is coming soon. I believe before they can fully pull this off, Jesus is coming. And so as they're ramping up, as the demons are ramping up their deception, as mankind and this conspiracy of men is ramping up their end of the great deception, Jesus is coming. I ain't going to set dates. We don't set dates on this channel. We're not going to say that that's on this day, but we believe that every single day could be the day. Time is growing extremely short. And I'm telling you, it says in the Bible that men's hearts will fail them for fear of what's coming upon the earth. And the only way to be sure that you're rapture ready to get off this planet when it comes time. And see, there's all these religions, right? There's all these religions all over the planet. There's the Muslims and the Buddhists and the Wiccans and the pagans and the Satanists and the New Agers and all the, and even the Catholics. They all have their doctrine, and I've done videos and shown you how they all have their doctrines and their inner circles that talk about a mass disappearance of Christians off the planet. I'm serious. Yeah, even Zoroastrianism, absolutely. Even Zoroastrianism, absolutely. All sorts of different religions have their doctrine about a mass disappearance of Christians off the planet. Okay, so this is happening, right? And even David Bay, who worked with Doc Marquis to help produce some of his first DVDs, was witnessing to a guy that was a high-level New Ager. The dude ended up giving his life to Jesus Christ, and invited David Bay to this high-level New Age meeting. All right. And it was interesting because when they went to this meeting, when they started channeling these spirits or whatever, these spirits and these channelers were telling their people to expect a mass disappearance of Christians. And this is a documented instance, just one documented instance. And so the only way to know for sure to be a part of this mass disappearance of Christians off the planet when Jesus comes to get his people is to believe and have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It says to believe in your heart and confess with your mouth. There's a lot of people confessing with their mouth. There's a lot of people confessing with their mouth, but they're not leaning into Jesus. With their actions, they confess with their mouth, but Jesus says, your heart is far from me. It has to be something that is not only with your mouth, where you're a fan. I'm a fan of Jesus. I proclaim Jesus. But to follow him, he says, you have to pick up your cross. You have to tell your flesh no. You have to crucify your flesh. And then he says, follow him. He also says, repent and be baptized. There's a lot of different angles we could go at it, but it's not just saying you're a Christian and thinking in your head that you know Jesus is real. Even Satan knows Jesus is real. And so the only surefire way to know that you're ready to not be deceived by this great deception that's coming is to believe in Jesus. Jesus truly is the red pill in the movie The Matrix. It's filled, that red pill is filled with the blood of Jesus Christ. And it is only by realizing that the blood of Jesus Christ atones for your sins that you're free from the matrix and the deception that's coming. And then you start to see it. And once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. People like Steven Spielberg in this movie he's creating, Disclosure Day, that's coming out this summer, because I'm telling you, they're getting ready to do big things this summer and afterwards. He has been a proponent for the alien agenda, the false flag alien agenda, for a long, long time. We could go into the different movies and TV shows that he's done, like Taken, E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I could go on and on and on about the movies. You know, even in that movie Paul about the alien, all right, Paul's supposed to be meeting with Steven Spielberg underground, and Steven Spielberg's on the phone with him getting information from this alien to be able to create his movies. And Steven Spielberg is absolutely a pedophile. He is absolutely involved in the whole Epstein stuff. All right, even Isaac Cappy talked about how Steven Spielberg was a pedophile. And I forget his daughter's name, but even his daughter talked about how she was surrounded by perverts and pedophiles and was abused her whole entire childhood. Michaela Spielberg or something like that. And so this stuff is real and it's going on. And the people that are these Baal, Luciferian, Satanist, Molech worshiping people in the order of the Illuminati are all being used by the enemy and the powers that be and the military industrial complex to help bring about this great deception. And I'm telling you, time is so short, it shows me they're getting ready to pull that trigger. They're getting ready to pull the trigger. And it's not going away. I'll even show you this. Hold on. It's to the point where they even have the White House and executive offices of the president have registered the websites alien.gov and aliens.gov. And it shows that it happened in March this year that they created alien.gov and aliens.gov. They even have an alien ambassador to the United Nations. And I forget what her name is. I forget what is like. It's like some African country she's from or something like that. I forget her name, but you can even look it up. There is a extraterrestrial ambassador for the United Nations that's already working with the United Nations. And I'll tell you right now, there's all these religions that talk about the aliens coming. Like I remember, I got a guy that I know that's a tattoo artist, right? And so when you're getting tattooed, man, I can attest that, people get real open, like it's almost like this like weird therapy session. You start talking about your life and the things you're doing in life, anything to get your mind off the needle going in and out of your arm. Right. So this lady that works for a courthouse that is a what do you call her? A social worker, that she'd be like the person that takes your children, when the judge orders the children to be taken and then the police are a part of it, and She said that she's a witch. She told him that she's a witch and that they're waiting for the aliens to come back. And when the aliens come back, there's going to be a new world order. These people that are in these religions, that are in contact with these beings, they know. They know what's coming. They know the deception that's coming, and they're ready to just accept it hook, line, and sinker. And people don't even understand that, like, even these people that are involved in this thing are a part of, like, and something I research a lot in is, MK Ultra, Project Monarch, Project Gate, Project Stargate, Project Artichoke, just mind control. The military industrial complex's mind control and the occult's mind control programs. All right. And even people that are a part of those mind control programs are being controlled in such a way that they believe that they're working for gray aliens instead of humans. And even and I can't remember if it was season 10 or season 11 of the X-Files, Mulder starts talking about how it's a conspiracy of men the whole entire time. A conspiracy of men. They come out with that, even in the X-Files finally towards the end, is that it's a conspiracy of men. And they drug these kids up and they make them think they're talking to aliens. I mean, these people that hit DMT and do ayahuasca and all this ayahuasca or whatever it's called and stuff and have contacts with these entities, they use those drugs to make these kids think that they're serving this alien force. And I have a close friend that this was being done with him. And he's legit. And more than likely, hopefully, I'll have him on the show on Monday. This upcoming Monday, I'll have him on the show. And he's already agreed to be on, but sometimes our schedules can clash. And to be honest with you, when me and him start talking, we've tried, he's been in one of my documentaries, and we tried to record for him to be in the second documentary, and his internet was crashing, just like mine was yesterday or the day before yesterday, because I didn't go live yesterday because it was my wife's birthday. But I was trying to show you footage of this thing slowed down and how this light showed up in my yard. And when I tried to show you the slowed down version, they were screwing me over right and left. And in fact, with that being said, because I'm when I push the envelope, I'm not scared. Even if I was to lose all of this, I can say it was all worth it. To tell people that were willing to listen for that moment, the truth, and the truth about what's going on. Now, I'll show you this. So this is my own driveway in the side of my house. I'm going to show you the original video, and then I'm going to show you a zoomed in, then slowed down video of this same security camera footage. And so I blocked everything, so you can't tell where I live, okay? But watch the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And you'll notice a little bit of flickering. And you can see like movement. There's something there moving. And it shines really bright. And it glows. This has never happened before as long as I've had this security camera. And then it just floats upwards. Just floats upwards. Now, I'll show you the slowed down and zoomed in version here. Here's the zoomed in version. Look at the lower left-hand part of the screen. And you can see it's like a flame, like it's really weird how it's like flapping around and moving in a weird way. And it glows real bright, and then it moves upwards, goes up. The glowing goes upwards and finishes into the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Now watch slow down here. You can see this thing literally moving. And this was just a few days ago. And then the last live that I did, I showed you more of these balls of light appearing over my house. And then today, at the beginning of today's show, I showed you the newer footage that I've gotten. And it's crazy because now see, it's freezing up right there. And at the end of the last live, that I did, I showed you that video and proved that I can play it because I kept trying and trying the last live that I did. But it's like when it comes down to that slower version, it just keeps freezing. And so I'll show you what happened today real quick for those of you who are just joining. But so this is what took place over my house last night. And again, I was there and I've seen satellites, I've seen planes, I've seen drones. All right. That's not what this is. All right. And I'll show you. These are two different clips back to back. And you see the one light moving away from the other light. This is directly over my house. There's no other stars in the sky. Just these lights doing maneuvers over my house. All right, now watch the left-hand side of your screen in the middle. At the very left, right here, it lights up and then it goes away. Here it is zoomed in, and it lights up and it goes away. And here's one more time, slowed down. It lights up and it goes away. And this stuff is happening right near my house. So, and I just showed you another slowed version. So it's not because it's slow. Every time I try to show that one slowed down version, my StreamYard messes up. I got kicked out of my StreamYard like 5 times the last live that I did. And I didn't lose internet because I went back and I was still live. And you can go watch that whole live. And I show the pictures of like 10 different orbs in the sky at once. So this stuff's going on. I do investigate pedophile satanic death cults and I expose them. And I am working on a really big investigation. And I'm going to be honest with you. I see this as an intimidation tactic to try to scare me from doing what I'm doing. And I'm not going to stop. Even if it means my life, I'm not going to stop. But I want to be able to tell people what's kind of going on. All right. And so, with that being said, I do still believe, though, that this is happening all over the place. There are so many people that are going through this. I got tons of emails, and there's a few comments where people shared that they were going through this. And so I thought it would be a good idea to come live today and to explain away this false flag conspiracy of men and the demonic entities and the fallen angels and Satan that are the rulers of this world for the time being, and the deception that they are trying to do to bring about a new world order. So with that being said, lean into Jesus with everything you are. Believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that he is Lord. It's the only way to be sure. May God bless you all. May he keep you. And please don't forget to go out and change this world in which you live.